What's up, YouTube? So I got the question, is Kobe the greatest Laker? And where does Kobe stand amongst the NBA's greatest? It's all relative, man. People can say how they feel and back it up with their own support. And there's no absolute right. There's no absolute wrong. So, there's nothing that I can say that would trump somebody else's feelings, So if I can say Kobe's number one, somebody can come on and say, well, I feel like he's number three, and they can have just as much evidence as I can. At the end of the day, this conversation is always going to be heavily biased in terms of where you live, in terms of how old you are, and, when you got introduced to basketball, and how well you actually understand the game of basketball, So once you take that into consideration, man, people are everywhere. So with that being said, all I can say is this. Kobe Bryant gets a bad rap because he's an asshole off the court. And people know who he is as a human being. You know Kobe Bryant as a human. Great player, used to be selfish, kind of understood how to grow and get his teammates involved. Off the court, he had the whole, rape case, but, he was found innocent. He didn't rape anybody, okay? She was a hoe. She got the business, and she couldn't handle it, so she cried rape. He's not really that open of a person, okay, kind of stiff. He has gotten a little bit better, though, over time in terms of opening it up and having more so of a personality. But that's who he is. We know him as a human being. Okay, just like now we know who Tiger Woods is as a human being. That is a product of where we are as a society, where we look at our athletes as real people, and we want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, we want to know what they're doing off the court, who they're with, where they drive. We want to know everything about them. We want to know the good and the bad. But in times before, you didn't do that. There was once upon a time, ago, there was the feeling that our athletes should be our heroes, and you saw that in cartoons, commercials, endorsements. We wanted these people to be our heroes. We wanted them to be role models, keyword role models. Charles Barkley was the first one to say, hey, I'm not a role model, right? But prior to that, that's what we wanted. You go into your library at school and, you see posters with Penny Hardaway, hey, you need to read, and, Tim Hardaway, do your homework, reading's fundamental. That's where our society was at the time. So we wanted to build our athletes up, and plus the NBA needed it in terms of marketing. They wanted their athletes to be seen in a good light, because it brought in, new customers, new viewers, people who would buy tickets and buy jerseys, and for Adidas, Reebok, and Nike, go buy the shoes, go buy the Jordans, go buy the Sean Kemps, go buy the Gary Paytons or whatever. So it was kind of a no-no to talk about what players did outside of the court. It was a no-no. How dare you, talk about what somebody's doing off the court? You don't do that, right? You just don't. People will look at you crazy because society wasn't there yet. If Jordan was playing now, I guarantee you, outside of Chicago, no one would like him, because off the court he was a prick. On the court he was a prick. Okay, when you talk about gambling and some of his other indiscretions, you wouldn't like it. But guess what? Most of y'all don't know about Jordan off the court because it wasn't really talked about. It was secret. Okay, it's a no-no to talk about Jordan's personal life. You just don't do it. He's an icon. So you don't know Michael Jordan as a human being. You know him as an icon. You know him as an NBA legend. You know him as Mr. Jordan. That's what you know Jordan as, okay? Same thing with Magic. Now, Magic has a great personality, and I'm not trying to hate or blast him, but, how do you think he contracted HIV? Magic was getting down. You hear stories about how he had 4 or 5 girls at one time. Dude was, living it up. Okay? But those are things that you never really knew about. Okay, you just knew that it was Magic Johnson, the good guy. Okay, even when he contracted HIV, there was no let's dive into the sexual life of Magic Johnson. Had Magic been playing now in the 2000s and that happened, they would be going into his partners, what he was doing, how dare him, he's supposed to be a role model, this, that, and the third. They would have got after him. Okay, but like I said, during those times, that's not how business was done. In terms of the media, and especially the sports media, and in terms of regular media, there was a secret understanding that, as a sports star, we're going to build you up. You are a role model to children. From a marketing standpoint, that's what people wanted to see. You were superhuman. So in terms of going back to the whole, is Kobe the greatest Laker, or where does Kobe stand amongst the NBA's greatest, just understand that you guys know Kobe Bryant as a human being. We all do. But some of the other people that are in that category, we don't know who they are. We just know them as the legends. That's all we know. We don't know. We can't go look up articles about this, that, and the third. We can't look up the tabloids and this, that, because nobody talked about it. Maybe unless you read a biography, but most people aren't going to read the biographies on Michael Jordan or whoever. So most people will have no idea about who these people were off the court. They'll never know. And a good example of what I'm talking about is Shaquille O'Neal. Because the beauty about Shaquille O'Neal, he kind of, he's the old guard. Okay, when did he come in the league? 90, 91? He's the old guard. So, he was part of, to me, NBA's golden era. Okay, up to when, Jordan won in 98. And he existed in the early 2000s, and even as of now, he's still in the league. And you didn't know about Shaq's indiscretions earlier in his career because he was part of that superhero sort of generation. Okay, bigger than life, big time role model. You didn't know about what was going on, what he was doing off the court, this, that, and the third. But as far as 2000, now you do know. Okay, you know about all the bullshit that happened with him and his wife, and supposedly he slept with Gilbert Arenas' wife, and the NBA told him not to come to the game. You know about all these stories. You know about Shaquille O'Neal's dirt, don't you? Right? Because that's what society is now. We want to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. We're personal. We want to know what's going on in your home. We want to know what you eat. We want to know what you're wearing. We want to know what you do when you wake up in the morning. That's who we are. Twitter, this, that, and the third. That's our generation. And Kobe is a product of that. And unfortunately, that takes away. I'm not saying it hurts, because it's good to know people as a human being. It's great that I know who Kobe is. It makes me appreciate him even more. He is a real person. Okay? But it's unfortunate because at the end of the day, that may hurt him in terms of where he stands, because people won't separate what he's done on the court. They want to look at, but he wasn't a good guy. He wasn't this, that, and the third. Right? Because, he did this, that, and the third. But in terms of everybody else, they're protected. Who's to say that Jordan wouldn't have got dropped from Nike if some of the things that he did was put out there like that? What would happen? Kobe's just now getting back in with Nike, okay? And it's unfortunate because one of the greatest shoes of all time, on a little side tangent, the Nike Huarache 2K4s, okay? You can go ahead and Google those. Probably my favorite shoe of all time. That was supposed to be Kobe's shoe. Okay, but Nike had dropped him from the time, or Nike had took away his signature line because of the rape case, and he didn't know that. He didn't get that, right? And that's part of his legacy, that gets tarnished. Jerry Buss didn't want to pay Shaquille O'Neal. It wasn't about him and Kobe beefing. Kobe and Shaq were beefing since day one. Okay, getting into fights at practice, that's nothing new for, true Laker fans. But Jerry Buss didn't want to pay him the money that Shaq wanted. But unfortunately, Kobe got blamed for that. Okay, which is very unfortunate. But, that's just Kobe for you. So like I said, for all the true basketball heads, I know you guys are going to have the conversation and the debate, but just don't make the mistake of looking at people from the 90s and the 80s and below as perfect superheroes because you don't know who they were off the court. But you do know who Kobe is, right? So, do with it as you feel best, but just keep that in mind. Take it easy. God bless.